let's talk about Lygo, the game I made at the MIT Shinkar summer workshop at MIT with a bunch of wonderful people: Gregory Kogos, Miranda Cover, Einat, Daniel Krumholtz, and we were guided by Philip Tan, and we have music and sound by Jamie Billings. But before we talk about it, I highly recommend that you actually go ahead and play it, because talking about it and playing through it myself, I'll probably spoil most of it. And as it is a 6-week game that we made in just 6 weeks, it is sadly kind of an experience that you play once and you're kind of good with it, I think. So before we start talking about it, please go ahead and play it. It's roughly 10 to 20 minutes depending on you and how you play it. And there are a couple of things that are unfortunate about it because it's such a short game, but hopefully you'll be able to play through it, enjoy it, and finish it in roughly 10 to 20 minutes. You should be able to click that Lygo sign, and you should be able to also find a link in the description below. So I'm assuming from now on that you've played it, because again, talking about it might actually ruin some of it, I guess, sort of. So we made this in 6 weeks at MIT itself. We had a lovely little workplace there that they gave us, and I worked with 3 other people. We were a team of 4, and we had our product owner that helped us out and guided us throughout the entire process. And towards the end, we were joined by a sound designer that helped us with sound, and that is the ambient music that you're hearing in the background is actually her work. So the theme that brought us together to make games, and I was actually one team out of 4 teams that were there and made 4 completely different games. Well, not entirely different, but somewhat different games. The theme was home, and each product owner, you don't want to say producer, you want to say product owner and mentor and the person who gave us guidance. Each one of them, and there were 4 of them, had a little bit of a different idea of what home meant and wanted to convey different feelings with subject to home. Specifically, when we're talking about the games that we made here, the theme is not only a general theme, but the games that we tried to make weren't just standard games that are just fun. That's the main thing that most games try to do. They were supposed to be meaningful games, or serious games. Games that have a little bit of meaning on top of that strict fun. And the challenge here is really to make a game that is not only fun, but also conveys this type of emotion or feeling that gives it a little bit of meaning, gives the game a little bit of purpose. And the theme there was home, and what we tried to convey is the feeling of leaving home, and the feeling of coming back home, how difficult it is to leave home, and how interesting it might be to come back home and feel a little bit of belonging to it. We think that first and foremost, it was most important to us to make an interesting game and a fun game. But if we manage to convey that feeling, then we're happy. We're all happy for it. And this is what we came up with. This is Lygo. And I'm going to take you through a little bit, as much as I can, of just the progression of building this from scratch. So we actually went through the first week just prototyping all kinds of games. We made a pretty big amount of games, and eventually we kind of coalesced at this one, and we playtested it in paper prototypes. I'm talking about nothing but paper prototypes, and eventually decided to make this in the computer and started working on it. And what we actually have here is, again, this is what we want it to be. This is what it was at the beginning. That you have this home. You have this home that is currently a planet. We usually call it socket because the original idea was a robot that's connected to a socket, so he needs constant electricity. We do keep most of it, so if I unplug, you can see that I have a battery, and it does kind of look like a socket that you connect to so that you have power, like a normal electrical socket. So we do have some of that, and we call them sockets, but they're kind of planets at this point. And you're, I guess, sort of a UFO exploring your surroundings. And what it was is really just an exploration game. It's an exploration game about, we wanted you to be able to leave your home and explore around you, but that needed to have some kind of risk, to not be as easy to leave your home. Your home is very safe. And in fact, in this position, while I am plugged into the socket with this cable, I can't die, I can't lose, there's nothing at all that can harm me whatsoever. The only danger comes once I pick up the battery that you saw me do at the beginning, out of habit really. You saw me pick up the battery, and then I get the option to unplug. And when I unplug, I have a battery. And this battery slowly depletes, and this is actually something that some people don't discover, that it depletes on a slow rate and a much faster rate if you actually move around. And you die. Now, one of the things that have been told to us a million times over is that we need a checkpoint system, we need a save system. We do not have that due to time constraints. We've only worked on it again. It's 6-week workshop, but only 5 weeks that we actually worked on computers because of the first week only working on prototypes. And we don't have that. That's one of the features that we definitely want to have in the game, but we don't have that. Luckily, I guess, we also don't have another feature, which is procedural generation. This level is completely the same every time, which kind of helps because if you played it through once and you died, then you at least know where most things are already. So it's not a big deal for you to miss too much and you have to do it over. But clearly both of these features are the stretch goals that we never got to. Procedural generation and save states. Checkpoints, if you will, on the planet. So this is really a battery, and note that we also have the light mechanic here, and that's actually something pretty important. It's done in a very simple way. This is actually, everything here is actually black, and this is actually, only around here, there's actually a hole. So you're actually seeing, this is alpha, and it's different layers of alpha, which allows you to see through that hole and see what's below that hole in the blackness. And you can see what's below it, which is a battery. Once I pick it up, you can actually see that it comes up, and then I have the ability to unplug. Only when I unplug, I'll be able to actually see my battery on top of me. And because I have now the ability to unplug, I can actually explore a little bit more, such as this cable, which I just can't reach, but if I unplug, pick it up, and then go back quickly, my cable is actually a little bit longer now. So we actually talked about a lot of different types of cables, and we eventually decided that a cable should be strictly home improvement, because we were talking about self-improvement, which is the battery, and we were talking about home improvement, which is making your home more your own. We had a bunch of other ideas that never saw the light of day, but this is what we have right now in the game that came up. That you have home improvement in the cables and you have self-improvement in the battery. And as you can see, now that I picked up a battery, I have 2 sections, which is basically double. I had 1, now I have 2, and when I continue taking it, I'll have 3 and 4 and 5 when I take more battery. Now, this is another cable, so I can pick up the cable, and as I do this, I'm able to see more and more around the area. One thing that every single playtester, and if you've played it, you've probably done it yourself, is this action of actually going around and exploring your surroundings, which is something we really like. And eventually, you always see something just out of reach, and then you want to unplug, which is dangerous and scary. And some people are like, this is kind of terrifying. And that usually happens. People usually die at the beginning of the game because you have so little battery. Later on, it actually becomes a lot easier because you have so much battery, and you also know your surroundings a little bit more, you know the mechanics a little bit more. And that exploration is a little problematic. It is a little bit too difficult at the beginning of the game. We've established from a lot of playtesting, but this is how the game eventually came up. But there's also the fact that you really do feel that progression. You feel much stronger towards the end. You feel like you know what you're doing. And discovering these things instead of having a tutorial is something that we really like because it adds to the exploratory nature of the game. So we unplug here, we pick up another battery, now we have 3 batteries, and we also pick up a light. Now, we had a couple of problems with the light. What it does is clearly give you a little bit of a bigger light, but we also ended up zooming out the camera a little bit, and some people had a problem with that. That's what we eventually settled on, but some people actually had a problem with zooming out the camera for the simple reason that when you zoom out the camera a little bit but you grow the light, the ratio between the camera that you have and the light remains roughly the same. So you don't necessarily feel like you can see more, but you can definitely see more. So let's see if you actually, not everybody catches that, but because I told you so, you'll definitely see it. They'll pick up the light, and I zoomed out a little bit, and now I actually have a bigger light, but it doesn't necessarily seem like I have a bigger light. But it is the case, and we felt that it was enough. Sometimes you also get to see just the edges of something, and you barely manage to know what it is. But if you unplug, you'll be able to see, and you'll be able to get it and progress further. Now, at some point, you'll reach, there'll be nothing left. There'll be nothing left, and you'll be forced to kind of continue onward. In this case, it's not exactly true. In this case, you have the radar, and we try to always have something. Not always the case, we'll get there. But in this case, you have the radar. Before I click the radar, I wanna just make sure that you notice these little particles that we think add, first of all, a frame of reference, which was kind of important because before it was all black, but also a little bit of a hint. A little bit of a hint to something more. And that hint is subtle enough that people don't notice it and still get the wow factor when the next thing happens. So you unplug, and you go to the radar, and you see points of interest. This is really a cool part of the game. And what some people don't notice is if you just stay on it, it'll continue happening, and also we've zoomed out. Once I leave it, I'll zoom back in. But that happens, and it's really cool. The closest one is clearly the one over here, and what happens, especially, you know this if you've played the game, is that you actually reach another planet. And this is a really cool moment for players. This is, oh wow, there's more planets that look different. And that is a really cool moment that people kept telling us how much they enjoy, that there are actually other planets. There are actually other homes. And that also makes sense to what we talk about, leaving home and coming back home. And there are other homes. You don't always, most people at least don't have only one home for the rest of their lives. They have several homes throughout their lives, home away from home, if you will, depending on your circumstance. And we really enjoy the fact that there are other sockets. Not only, it also contributes to the fact that you improve yourself, and that remains constant, but your new home starts out with a similar cable to this home. So it's kind of to what was there in the beginning. So you can improve this home. And this is something that we didn't really touch on too much, but if I'll find another cable, I can actually take this cable and attach it to this world, or I could take this cable and attach it to the other world. And it actually allows for a couple of pretty interesting things. If you always take the cable and put it in the first world instead of the second ones, the ones that it's close to, that's totally possible. And some people actually did this. Not most, but some. And we enjoy that. We think that's an interesting thing. It allows you to play favorites maybe with homes, which is interesting. It doesn't really come into play from the level that we have here, from the level design, but it is a big possibility. Now, you might have seen this thing, and this thing is really where we're going with in terms of completion, of what is your goal. Right now, we don't have a goal. We're walking around, we're trying to explore, we're trying to understand this game world. But, and this is something that we worked on very hard, and we hope we've reached something that's good. We wanted to convey mechanics through art, and we worked on it very difficult. Not me specifically, I'm the coder usually, but I helped with as much as I can, but the artists worked very difficult to show you, and you can see it here at the bottom. I can actually just go there. These worlds are not complete, they have a hole. You see this, but you don't entirely know, but once you pick up this thing, we call them gems, once you pick up the gem, it becomes a little bit obvious. And this also has a very distinct sound and also UI. It goes up. So let's pick this up and see what happens. We have this distinct sound, and it comes up here. So this is now, we have this on us. And a lot of people try to click that, which is fine. It makes sense that you'd want to click that as UI, but it isn't. You can't click it is what I mean. We did want a lot of things in the sense that you see that the player actually has lights around him, and we thought about making the shapes go into you and minimizing UI almost completely so that you wouldn't have any UI at all, and everything will be on the player, which makes a lot of sense, but it really didn't come into our scope because that takes a lot of tweaking and is a lot harder to do. So we settle on having as minimalistic as possible UI. And now when you have this part, you could continue exploring, but some people actually go back, and eventually you will go back, but some people go back, and when that happens, you actually go into sort of a cutscene. We call it a cutscene. It's not really a cutscene, but let's go in here and see what happens. This part fits here, doesn't it? So now I can't unplug once I plugged in because we zoom in the camera and we want players to see this. We have this sound, and this thing gets completed and starts glowing. And this part here also glows to remind you that you've already done that part. And this kind of becomes your goal. You now, when this happens, not everybody understands it, it's not perfect, but the player does manage to understand that this is what he needs to do. He needs to complete these planets. He needs to make them whole. And that really becomes your quest. And at that point, it stops being a little bit of an exploration game and starts being a little bit more of a puzzle game, where you have all these points of interest, and you want to just go to these points of interest and understand where you need to go and what you need to fill out and finish the game through that. And that's kind of where we were going with. I remember that I know exactly what I'm doing because I remember the entire game, so I'm not really at risk at any time. And one thing that I want to talk about, I'm not at risk because I know what I'm doing, but clearly players would have less idea of where things are. So we try to put things in terms of level design in the correct places, such as this radar directing you towards this, and this radar directing you towards the third socket, which is found at the bottom down there. And once we'll reach it, we'll talk about the last socket, which is a little bit more interesting. But there's one thing I want to talk about that's really, really important and nobody notices, which is wonderful. We had a lot of problems with the battery. The battery, we wanted to put it on the player as usual. That's not going to work. It was over here at the top, at the top where my face is right now. And we had a timer. Well, it's not a timer. We had a number there, and everybody thought it was a timer. So it was obviously it needs to be not number. It needs to be visually like this, like an actual battery. And we try to attach it to the player and have it move around, but then you really couldn't see anything. So eventually we reached this thing, and what we have right now is perfect and nobody notices it, and everybody constantly sees where the battery is. So what prevented us from just putting it at the top as it is right now? That works very well, but you have one problem. When you're pointing your light upwards, it gets in your way. So what we did is, when I point and nobody notices this, when I point my light upwards, it actually just goes down. And when I look down, it goes up. Nobody notices this very subtle, tiny little change. But it means that you always see it, and because we keep it vertical and it stays exactly how it is, you don't notice that it doesn't hinder you. You can totally see at all times how much battery you have, and it doesn't hinder your vision. And I'm actually really, really happy with how we reached it. That was, we talked through it a lot, and the breakthrough came when Philip, our product owner, the one guiding us, who has a lot, his thing is kind of visual representation. He thought of maybe you should just jump up and down, and we thought about it a little bit, we put it in, and it works very well. And this is one of actually this small thing that I'm very, very proud of about this game, about visually representing to the player the feedback that he needs to know without hindering him. And that's really very, very important, a field that I really, really enjoy, and Philip also researches, which is really, really cool. So let's continue playing the game. I'm going to check this radar out, and there's a couple of points here, and this point is actually this third planet that you reach. And yes, as I said before, these little dots that are around the planets show you that, oh, there's probably something there. So I'm just going to pick up this one, which is right here, which is perfectly fine, and I'm going to pick up the other one, again, because I know you could clearly explore, and you could take more things that are around, more cables and whatnot. But because I know the game and I want to move forward and keep explaining, then we're going to skip most of it and just run through the game. You pick this one up, and this is where you get a shape of a socket that you haven't seen yet. And also because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, then you know there's one missing. You know there's one missing, and this is the fourth one. So with this, it is very clear that there are 4 sockets in the game. It might be more. There isn't. There might be more, but there isn't. So yeah, some people just might come back. A lot of people actually come back, and you can see that this is a square and we have a circle. So we know that there's one more socket that we need to find. And this is a turning point. This is where, do you understand how the game works? Did you understand all the subtle hints that we put out, or didn't you? And if you didn't, you might do something like this after picking up everything, just randomly going in that direction, and when you reach roughly half, you go back because you don't want to die. And this is, when that happens, I know that we didn't do enough. We didn't do enough to explain that the game doesn't do enough for the player. And some players that happens. For some players it doesn't. But that is where we didn't do enough. We really didn't do enough because the player doesn't know what to do. And what do you actually do? Well, the point here, what we tried to convey, is really that now that you're much more powerful, you could go back to this original planet and actually look around here. You have more light, you have bigger light, more zoom in, and you also have more battery, so you could explore and eventually probably see this radar, which is, there's no way you could see it at the beginning, but now you can. And if you go up a little bit, you start seeing these tiny little dots that signify that there is actually another socket down there, which is exactly what we're going to get to. So what was our point with this? We talked about coming back home and coming back to your original home. And that's what we tried to convey with this little bit of level design, where you actually have to go back to the original star, to the original planet, socket, whatever you want to call it. And from there on, because you're so much stronger, because you've evolved, you can actually explore in a completely different direction. That's what the thought was behind it. And here you find the last piece. And now that we've lit up all three of them, we can go and light up the last socket and actually finish the game. And in finishing the game, we wanted to show you what are, the really over just the features that we wanted to have in the game. What is the really giant, big thought that we had, and how we see the game if we had 6 months to develop it or a year to develop it. And that is really, if you finished it, hopefully you finished it on your own. If not, then you'll get to see it here. You get a little bit of a winning music. You dislodge. You are unplugged, but you don't have a battery because you can move out wherever you want. And suddenly you see one over there, and you see one over there, and suddenly they're everywhere. And there are other sockets. There are other, I don't want to know if I want to call them Lygos, but there are other robots out there, and they're moving around, and they're trying to do the same thing as you are. They're trying to fill up these sockets. And this feeling we wanted to convey here, wanted to show you that the sense of wonder, the sense of there are other people out there. You're not alone in this world. And with them, you can create new homes for yourself. With these other people, you can explore, and you can make the world a wonderful place by, fixing all of these sockets that are empty. I don't know if we managed to do that, but you've evolved enough to completely unshackle yourself. You're free to roam around with all these homes and that you created for yourself. And that's Lygo. That's what we made in 5 weeks. I'm really pleased with it. I hope the others are pleased with it as well. I'm going to click the credits one just to show you a little bit that it was created by Gregory KOKOStern, Miranda Cover, and Daniel Krumholtz. Guidance by Philip Tan, and sound by Jamie Billings. It is the Shinkar College of Engineering and Design MIT Game Lab, and all of the assets that we used and everything. Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Shinkar College of Engineering, Design, and Art. And yeah, you're free to restart. There's a little bit of a nice winning music, I guess. And that's Lygo. I don't know if I'll get to work on this more in the future. Might be, might not be. But I'm really pleased with it. It gave me, I learned a ton during this project, working with other people in terms of production that we put up there. Prototyping, paper prototyping, we made so many games. And it was a wonderful experience. I really enjoyed my time. This is the final video that I'll put up in the MIT workshop devlog, I guess, or just, it wasn't really a devlog, it was just a vlog that I made during my stay there. And that's it. It was an awesome summer. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time.